Well, today, the Senate of the United States, led by Mitch McConnell, caved on President Obama's executive amnesty. You knew this was coming because I said that it was going to. I said that the Senate of the United States was going to cave on executive amnesty because after there was that good ruling in Texas putting an injunction on Obama's executive amnesty, then the Republicans had an option, which was they could either pass the Department of Homeland Security funding without executive amnesty funding, or which Democrats would try to filibuster and Obama would have to veto, or they could pass a full Department of Homeland Security funded bill and just rely on the courts to stop everything. The problem, of course, is that it's the job of Congress to stop the President of the United States from usurping congressional authority. Well, joining us on the line is Louie Gohmert. He's a congressman from the state of Texas, one of the few honest politicians in America. Congressman Gohmert, how are you?
Wow, that's quite an introduction, Ben. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure if that's more of praise for you or repudiation of your colleagues, that you're one of the few honest politicians in America.
I detect a little of both there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let me ask you, Louie. Obviously, the Senate of the United States, Mitch McConnell, has now kicked it back to the House. He passed a bill today that is a clean DHS funded bill. It funds the entire Department of Homeland Security,
Ben,
including executive amnesty.
How can you call that clean? He left all the nastiness, the illegality, the unconstitutionality. That's all still going to be funded and primed. How can that be clean? I know you're using the terminology that the Senate used, but it's really tough to consider that clean. I feel so dirty.
I hear that, and I think that's a good point. So they passed let's put it this way, they passed the entire package of DHS funding, including Obama's egregious executive amnesty bill. McConnell says he wants to bring up a separate bill that would supposedly defund the executive amnesty. Of course, that's not going to happen because that's not, number one, it's not going to pass. Number two, even if it did pass, Obama would just veto it. He would end up with his funding. No problem. Everything ends up great for the Democrats. Basically, it seems to me that Harry Reid now runs the Senate of the United States because Mitch McConnell has now made it clear that he is not going to hold Senate Democrats' feet to the fire. He's just going to allow, anytime they stop anything, he's going to pass something and then force the House to go back to the drawing board and pass something Democrats like.
Well, I mean, I don't have a problem with the Senate passing something that's a little different than we send down. That's the way it often works. We pass something, the Senate passes something, and then it goes to conference committee. The problem is when it's as basic as Homeland Security funding, and we've had since, December when the omnibus was passed and a separate CR for DHS, we've had all that time to figure out what was going to happen. And Republicans had promised that we do not intend to fund illegal amnesty. It was unconstitutional. It's illegal. The president spoke it. Jay Johnson did a memo. That's it, a memo to change years and years of properly passed and signed into law legislation. And so we weren't going to do that. So that's the real problem, the breaking of the promises. Gee, if you'll just give us the majority in the Senate, then we promise you we will stop this illegal amnesty. And you have one district court that says properly that it's illegal, and then all of a sudden you have Republican senators saying, hey, that's good enough for us. They took care of our job for us. We don't need to do our job. We'll let the courts do that. Well, we don't know what the Supreme Court will do. When you've got a Chief Justice like John Roberts, brilliant as he is, who at page 15 of his decision on Obamacare will say absolutely the money raised is a penalty. It's not a tax, because if it were a tax, we'd have no jurisdiction to hear this. And therefore, since it's a penalty, we'll go on and take up the issue, and then 40 pages later say, since it's a tax, it's constitutional. You can't trust a court that will do that. You can't trust a Chief Justice that will do that. We were elected to do a job, and we made promises in order to get elected to do that job. And by golly, we ought to keep those promises.
And Louie, here's one of the things that I fear is that typically the courts have found that when presidents do smaller executive amnesties of the sort that Obama is pursuing here. And nobody's ever done the work permit routine, but when there have been in the past decisions that affect a broad swath of people that we're just not going to prosecute a broad swath of people, George H.W. Bush did this. When that happened, typically the courts would say it was okay, mainly because Congress signed off on it. So George H.W. would pass some sort of executive amnesty program, small executive amnesty, and then the court would say, well, the Congress went along with it, so clearly it's not a big deal. My fear is that this thing goes through, the DHS funding goes through, and the court turns around and says, well, look, clearly, I mean, the Congress was okay with funding the program. You know, they could have signaled their discontent with funding the program by just defunding it in the DHS, but they gave Obama every penny that he sought, so obviously they were okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's apparently that's what the vote says. But you know it's wrong. We know it's wrong. We've got to stand firm and keep our promises.
How's it going to go down in the House?
And it's up to us now. They've done their thing.
Well, this is why I'm so angry at McConnell, because this could have been a Republicans versus Democrat fight, and now it's turned into a Republicans versus Republicans fight, where you have people like Mitch McConnell saying the House should pass what the Senate has passed, and now it's up to the House to do what the House is going to do. He's now thrown it squarely into John Boehner's lap.
Totally fair about it. It's not just now turned into Republican versus Republican. We also, in addition to that, we helped the Democrats in the Senate that were in tough districts that might have a problem getting reelected if they voted to allow the illegal amnesty. So we also, in addition to turning ourselves against each other, we helped the Democrats substantially by giving them the ability to vote separately to defund the amnesty in a bill that will not go anywhere, and the president won't. You know, it's not going to ever become law. We gave cover to Democrats that should be defeated for not standing more firmly against amnesty.
So, Louie, how is this going to shape up in the House? Because there have obviously been significant criticisms of John Boehner, I think well-founded, over the last couple of years for caving on issues exactly like this. There's a lot of pressure from members of the House for Boehner not to cave on this particular issue. How do you think this shakes down? Is he going to end up once again violating the Hastert rule in order to get enough votes in order to press forward a fully funded DHS bill, including executive amnesty?
Well, and that's the $64,000 question. And it remains to be seen. The Speaker has said as recently as yesterday that we're not caving, and, you know, it's what he promised. This is his plan. You know, we're the ones, many of us, you included, that said the way to do this is not to fund everything but Homeland Security. Let's go after defunding the things the president cares about. That's better leverage than Homeland Security that we Republicans care so deeply about. But this was the Speaker's plan, and he said that we would stand up against the amnesty. So now let's see if he's going to stay true, because you know I am. You know, there's plenty of other Republicans that will stand firm and keep our words. So hopefully, you know, let's count on the Speaker to do the right thing this time and not cave.
Well, Louie, let me ask you about, we're speaking with Louie Gohmert, congressman from Texas. And Louie, the President of the United States today, the White House issued a blog post titled "Taking Action to Unlock the Economic Contributions of Americans in Waiting." And Americans in waiting are illegal immigrants. The announcement that the White House defends the president's actions on immigration as being within his legal authority, and then they say that they need to lock in the economic benefits of those who are qualifying for the program, and they use the language Americans in waiting. And that shows a pretty high level of confidence that he's going to be able to do whatever it is that he wants to do, because we have a lawless president. But the terminology is just Orwellian.
Well, it's hard to know what to say right now, but with this president, if we don't stand firm, he's going to continue running over us. It's going to just get worse and worse. He's got 2 years left, and for heaven's sake, if we can't stand up on this one, I don't see us standing up on anything that's important as a party, which will once again demoralize the base, which would once again keep millions of people home in 2016 when we desperately need them to come out. And you know, hey, the independents did vote for Romney, but they lost the conservative base, and that's what allowed Obama to win a second term. We can't do that again. We can't betray our conservative base, the people that have gotten us where we are. And so I'm hoping and praying that our leadership is going to stay true to their word, because there's sure going to be a bunch of us that will.
Louie, let me ask you, I want to switch topics a little bit. The President of the United States is obviously on the offensive, not just against those of us who actually want immigration law enforced, but he's also on the offensive against Benjamin Netanyahu. Today, the Secretary of State ripped into Prime Minister Netanyahu for having supported the war in Iraq, which I thought was a good thing when we have foreign countries that support the agenda of the United States at the time. I always thought that was a positive. The Secretary of State was ripping Netanyahu. Susan Rice was ripping Netanyahu. The President of the United States is ripping Netanyahu. Obviously, Bibi is supposed to come and speak to Congress next week. How is what's the mood in the House as far as the partisanship surrounding all of this? Because we now have a number of House members, particularly members of the CBC.
There's so many of us in Congress that are just completely shocked that this administration and so many Democrats would turn on Israel's leader. I mean, for heaven's sake, it's bad enough that Obama turns against Israel and their leader and tries to prevent them from defending themselves, prevent them from being a sovereign nation that gets to protect their own borders. They've been threatened. They've been cajoled. They've been belittled. This administration has done everything they could to force Israel to, or at least try to force them to elect a new leader who would do whatever Obama tells them. But for heaven's sake, I really hope that those low approval ratings in Israel of the trustworthiness of Obama will show themselves in this election, because if they elect a leader that will, somebody different than Netanyahu's, and somebody that will do whatever Obama tells them, well, they might as well kiss their ears goodbye, because Israel is in deep trouble. And that would mean, for those of us who believe in the prophecies in the Bible, that the United States is in even deeper trouble, because we have not stood with our friend Israel. We have not been a blessing to our friend. We've been a curse to our friend, and that means curses for us. So,
well, Louie,
I hope Obama is not going to be successful in pushing Israel into electing a weak leader that does what Obama says. And I'm telling you, lots of us are excited. Let me also tell you, there have been so many requests. This hadn't happened in the 10 years I've been here. There have been so many requests for tickets to sit in the gallery that the speaker has opened up a room that will hold several hundred more people that won't be able to sit in the gallery, that'll be watching it on a monitor. I mean, there is really, Ben, there's a real excitement in Washington to hear a real leader speak to Congress for a change.
Louie, what do you think is, aside from trying to push forward new Iranian sanctions, aside from trying to stop Obama's executive amnesty, what's next on the Republican agenda? Because we've had repeals of Obamacare passed about 1,000 times in Congress. Those aren't going anywhere. What exactly do you think Republicans are supposedly going to try to get done in the near future that is actually realistic?
Well, I've talked to Paul Ryan about this, and he and I both agree. Him from a financial background, me from a legal background. But I'm telling you what, I get the impression the Supreme Court wants to do the right thing on the lawsuit that's going to be decided by June. And that is, the law is very clear. States that don't set up an exchange are not allowed to have their residents get subsidies. But then the Obama administration realized if we don't give them subsidies, this whole thing's going to fall on its face. So they started violating the law that they passed, and they said clearly, if you don't set up an exchange in the state, your people don't get subsidies. Well, they gave them anyway. That's what's been challenged. And the Supreme Court will want to do the right thing. I really believe a majority on the court at least wants to do the right thing. The law is very clear. You don't get the subsidies. But the Obama administration has a history of sending information before the court that says if you do this, it'll destroy everybody's health care. It'll destroy America. They gloom and doom stuff. So we need to immediately pass a bill that will deal with what happens for the rest of the year when the Supreme Court strikes down the subsidies. Okay, we'll block grant this money. It'll get us to the end of the year. And then at that point, we'll have a new health care bill that will address all these problems. We'll build up health savings accounts. We'll get competition in health care. We'll do it, but we've got to right now show the Supreme Court by passing a bill. It's not going to be gloom and doom. We're prepared for you to strike down the subsidies, and the world won't come to an end because we've passed it. We're working on it. And I'm afraid if we don't do that very quickly, and I mean very quickly, then the Supreme Court's not going to be as inclined to strike down the illegal subsidies. So,
Congressman Louie Gohmert.
Now, in fairness, that shouldn't even play an issue at all. The Supreme Court.
Congressman, I got you. We got to run to break, and I really appreciate your time. Congressman Louie Gohmert from the great state of Texas is standing up for the American way. Really, I mean, he's a stalwart, and we appreciate it. Louie, thanks so much for joining the Ben Shapiro Show.
Thanks so much, Ben. Look forward to seeing you soon.